Howdy Moz fans, welcome to another edition of Whiteboard Friday. My name's Cyrus. Today we're going to be talking about how Google knows what sites you control and why it matters. How much does Google know about the sites you own? Can that be used to your advantage? Can it be used to hurt you? These are important questions that webmasters often ask. Now technically, when there are relationships between websites, when you own websites, you have a lot of websites you control, this is traditionally known as an administrative relationship, meaning that you are an administrator. You can control the links on the site, you control the content of the site. Maybe these are subdomains that you own, maybe these are multiple properties within your business. But Google, over the past decade or so, has spent an incredible amount of energy trying to figure out administrative relationships between websites, both to help you and sometimes to discount links between those sites or have potentially some negative consequences. And the reason that this is so important to Google is because if you think about the link graph and relationships between sites, links between sites that are controlled by the same person probably shouldn't count as much as links that are editorial and controlled by other people. Because when you get links, you want them to be natural and not something that you control. But other times, Google wants to reward you for links that are related to one another. There are some definite advantages to establishing those relationships between sites that you own, and sometimes you want to tell Google that you own multiple sites. One example is to distribute the authority between those sites. Now, a perfect example is something like eBay. eBay has a site in the United States, and they open a brand new site in Ecuador. And they want that Ecuador site to rank well, but they don't want to start over. They've already built up their American sites so much, they want to transfer some of that link equity. So they want to let Google know that, hey, this is eBay, this is us, this should be an authoritative website. And this also works on a much smaller scale too sometimes. Often on subdomains, you see a lot of blogs being started on subdomains of websites because it's easier from a development point of view or for whatever the reason. And you want that subdomain, that blog, to have the same authority as your main site. Now, it's oftentimes up to Google whether or not they give that authority to your blog or your subdomain. But if you can give them signals to tell them, yes, this is associated with my main domain, that often goes a long way in helping that subdomain to rank. Same with alternate languages. You have French content, you have Spanish content, you have English content. They're all on your site. Maybe they're on a different subdomain or a different top-level domain, but you want Google to know that they have the same authority as your main site that you worked so long to build up. And also, we're starting to see identity play a role in administrative relationships, more at a page level with things like Google authorship and things like that. But identity is becoming a big issue, and Google is working to figure out those identities on the web. Then there's the flip side, the bad side of administrative relationships. And that's traditionally what SEOs and webmasters have been dealing with when they think about these things. The biggest problem is diminished link equity. Again, that problem of Google seeing that you control these sites, why should they pass as much link equity as sites that you don't control? So a lot of black hat SEOs, gray hat SEOs go to great lengths to hide their relationships between sites because they don't want Google to discount that link equity. Also, the idea of link schemes and bad neighborhoods. If there are 12 sites and they're all interlinking to each other, that might be a pretty good signal to Google that it's sort of a link scheme and those links shouldn't count or they could be penalized. And finally, we're seeing a new phenomenon in Google, penalties following people around the web. These are instances where people are penalized, they burn their site to the ground, they're so frustrated, they decide to just start over on a completely new domain. But when they do so, ironically, amazingly, they find the penalty transferring to that new domain, even though they've cut all the backlinks, they've changed the URL, everything. How does Google know that that's the same site? So these are important questions to ask yourself and help determine, can you be helped by establishing these relationships between sites, or can you be hurt? And if you understand some of the signals Google's using, you can take advantage of this. Now, one thing I want to emphasize, we don't know all the signals. We have a few clues. Traditionally, Google has been looking at things like ownership, who-is records, very freely available on the internet, where your site is hosted, the IP address, things like that. Elijah, what's the name of that website that we go to check who owns what?
Spy on Web?
That's right, Spy on Web. Here's a simple experiment you can do. Go to Spy on Web, type in a very common domain like moz.com. I'll link to it in the transcript below. And you can see all the relationships that we have, Moz, with all these sites that we either own or hosted on the same IP or the same Google Analytics code or the same AdSense code, all this information is publicly available on the web. You don't need access to your Google Analytics account or your AdSense account. It's all there in the source codes of the websites. And by scraping the web and gathering all this information together, you can create a web of ownership that's pretty easy to dissect. Traditionally, C blocks have been an indication of relationships on the web, and something Moz here we report in Open Site Explorer, number of unique linking C blocks. Right now, though, we are in a transition with this, where the web is moving to a new Internet Protocol version 6. The old C block was based on version 4. So C blocks is actually going away, and the engineers here at Moz, working with some very smart people in the consulting world, such as Distilled, we're figuring out some new standards to report instead of C blocks because we're losing these very soon. And also link patterns. When you have, again, a lot of sites linking to each other, this creates, and Google has a complete catalog of links, or the most complete catalog of links on the web. When you take all this together using various statistical analysis methods, you can determine pretty closely who's associated with what, who has control over what. And these are all things that people are looking at, all that publicly identifiable information. Some signals that people don't often consider are what I would call soft signals or content signals. And these are more advanced that people don't actually always think about. But things that Google could look about that we've seen them talk about in patent papers are things like when two sites have identical or similar content, meaning content on site A is the same as content on site B. This would be a strong clue to Google that it may be the same site. They'd probably look for a few of these other things, such as who has registration or analytics code or something like that, because a lot of sites get scraped. It's not a very clear signal. But if you're simply moving your site from one site to another to escape a penalty, that may be not enough if you're using the exact same content and some of those other things, such as similar images. Two images hosted on the different sites with the same content could be an indication that the sites are owned by the same entity. Formatting, CSS. You'll often see sites that are owned by the same individual use a lot of the same WordPress templates, for example, or a lot of the same CSS files or JavaScript files. Again, by themselves, this is not a definitive clue because there's a lot of templates out there, a lot of free stuff floating around the internet. But when combined with the other signals, it can create very, very clear indication of those relationships. Even something as simple as the contact details on your About Us page. If those are the same from site to site, they can be very clear that these sites are related. And then on the page level, we have things like authorship. I've seen this work really well with in-depth articles, certain authors. This isn't a domain level signal, but more of a page level signal that can help individual pages to rank. And for content and language signals, the hreflang. Again, this is when you have sites in different countries, different languages. Using this attribute can help establish those relationships to help you to rank. So in general, it's very hard to hide these relationships with Google from Google because they have so much data available, and it's really not worth it. But oftentimes it is worth it in the cases of subdomains, alternate languages, authorship, that you want to help boost these signals. And understanding how these all work can give you clues as to why you're ranking, why you're not, and sometimes what you can do to help. That's all for today. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Shh. Here's an advanced SEO tip. How do we hide from the evil eye of Sauron? With our secret black hat ring.